right. We're good. Yep.
All right, good evening. We're going to get everything started here. We've got a large group online, so thank you all for joining us, and the group that is here in person. I just want to say thank you for coming out this evening. This is, I think, the most important topic that we are dealing with right now. It has always been difficult to parent, and the addition of devices and phones and social media has made it all the more important that we really do become a village and support each other as we all walk through this journey. So we are very fortunate today to have Jenna Poste with us. Jenna is a tech executive, product leader, and passionate advocate for safer digital spaces for kids. With over 20 years in technology, including leadership roles at BlackBerry, LifeRaft, and now in health tech, Jenna appreciates the value of technology, the value that technology can bring to our lives, but deeply, deeply understands the harm it can cause to a developing mind. As a mother of 2 young children and the co-founder of Unplugged Canada's Nova Scotia chapter, she's working to drive policy change and empower parents to delay smartphones and social media to protect our kids' mental health and their future. So without further delay, Jenna, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So I'm going to go off camera here for the folks online, just so you're not distracted from me, mostly kind of chatting to the room here, but hopefully you guys can hear us okay. Can anybody give me a thumbs up that the volume and everything's all right? Hopefully that's good. I'm not seeing anything else, so all right. Everything's good on there? All right. So that was basically, I first just want to say thank you. Thank you for everybody who's joining us in person, who braved the roads tonight, and everybody online, because as you said, parenting is hard. These are not easy conversations for us to have with the parents, with each other, with our kids. And we're all really just trying to do our best. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. And tonight I hope is really about kind of coming together, supporting each other in this. And hopefully, you know, whether your kid doesn't have a smartphone yet, has one, has been asking for one, I think you'll take something away from this. And hopefully we'll see there's a lot of people around who are looking for some change and looking for us to, you know, give our kids back, you know, probably more of a childhood we all grew up with. I won't dive too much into this because you just did a great intro for me, but I'm a mom of 2. I've got 2 young kids, 6 and 7 now. I did start my career at BlackBerry, so, you know, working on the one of the first smartphones. I spent 10 years in social media, actually building products that flag and remove harmful content. So I deeply understand how dark that space can get. And I'm more recently working in the health tech space and trying to build products that actually help people's well-being. And so for me, it was a catalyst reading The Anxious Generation last year. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It really is an eye-opening assessment and analysis of the research now we have looking back 10 years since kids started getting phones. And so back in September, I got connected with the folks at Unplugged. They had just launched here in Canada, very similar to Wait Until 8th movement that's been going on in the States for some time. And I wanted to get involved. I wanted to see what I could do to change things in my community, in Nova Scotia, and ideally around the world. So yeah, so for those of you who aren't familiar with Unplugged, I'll touch on it a little bit here and then talk a bit more going through, but we're basically a parent-driven organization that's just trying to help educate parents on the risks of early smartphone use and inspire a collective movement to restore childhood. Because, you know, through advocacy and resources, online pledge, we're trying to empower parents to unite together and really delay that smartphone to give our kids back a more smartphone-free childhood, more play-based childhood. And we've had over 2,000 pledges already, and it grows every day. So, you know, we're in our infancy compared to some of the ones that have been around for years. Unfortunately, Canada is behind on this, but it is growing every day. And it's been incredibly inspiring to have these conversations and see every parent honestly feel a little bit of relief that we're finally talking about this. So why are we here tonight? My hope is that you guys will take something away from this and learn a little bit more about the impacts of smartphones on childhood's development. I'm going to give you some actions that you can take today to actually give them back a healthier childhood and some resources to feel empowered and spur conversations, hopefully in your community and with parents around you. I'll talk a little bit, about 45 minutes, hopefully, and then we'll leave some Q&A time. And for those in the room, maybe some chance to kind of hang out and talk about what we just heard. So really last year was a turning point for this topic. We saw new research coming out about the impacts of this. Again, much of it summarized in the anxious generation. We saw new cell phone restrictions coming in place. I know here there's been some policy already, but Nova Scotia in the public system has just introduced bell to bell in elementary, and then it's still allowed except for an instructional time in middle school and high school. So there's still more work to be done, but it is a step forward in that. And we saw that across the country and around the world. And there's even new legislation being proposed where countries are waking up and saying, we need to do something about this addictive apps, this technology, and we need to recognize it similar to what we do with other addictive products and create some restrictions around that. But how did we get here? When you think back 20 years ago, Nokia ruled. We all had maybe Blackberries and Nokia phones that really just did talk and text. Then 2007, we had the iPhone get introduced and the App Store a year later. And that's when these devices really started to change. Instagram launched in 2010. We start getting that front-facing camera, the selfie culture, the influencers, curating like the best part of your life's online. And then 2011, you got 4G launching across Canada, which means everybody can be always on and always connected with a device. And it was way more infiltrated throughout our culture. 2017, TikTok was available in Canada. And this is when we really got that, highly addictive short form content that just has an endless amount of scrolling you can do. And that's where we are today, where 87% of 12-year-olds have a smartphone in Canada. And that stat is a little bit old, so it might be higher by now. And they're really not phones at all. I think this to me is what is interesting is I think when most parents think about like wanting to give their kid a phone, they're really thinking about giving them something that can talk and text. But the default is to give them their old iPhone. And really that is a pocket supercomputer that gives you 24/7 access to the internet and the world in their pocket. But not only did the tech change in this time, childhood changed. So we went from what we had for millennia, a play-based childhood where kids were just meant to play and have fun and develop all these motor skills and social skills, to this phone-based childhood where that is now the center of their lives. And, we started to overprotect in the real world kind of around the mid-80s to 90s, but we actually have been underprotecting in the online world. And that's kind of where we need to start to flip the switch on this. And parents are unfortunately right now in a really impossible situation because it doesn't really feel like a choice anymore. Like the culture has shifted so much that we actually feel like we either give our kids access to a product we know could be harmful, or we risk alienating them from their peers at a really critical time in development, definitely around that puberty, middle school age. And parents wish things were different. Majority of parents know or feel that smartphones are harmful. And 70% of parents say that they have seen negative impacts on family life because of this. Like the number one thing that people fight about these days is screen time. And 64% report negative impact on their sleep. Like as somebody who's been in this health tech space for a while, like sleep is so critical for development, for mood, for attention spans, for academic performance. And that is having a massive impact on them. And I think what's really unique about this is that the young people wish this was different. When you actually talk to the folks who've been lived through this, there's always this conversation of like, this is just a moral panic. Parents every generation think that like TV is going to melt your brain. But when we were growing up and that was coming out, nobody was saying, I wish this had never been invented. There was nobody marching in the streets wanting to say, we need to see change. But 67% of 16 to 8-year-olds, 18-year-olds, pardon me, think that smartphones are harmful. And half of them wish that TikTok and Snapchat had never been invented. Like, I think that's what's really powerful. And I just did a 40-student high school focus group last week. And we asked them, like, would you have gotten your smartphone when you got it? And many of them were kind of thinking, yeah, I don't know. But they were like, what about social media? And they're like, I wouldn't be on it right now if I didn't have to be. If I didn't feel like I had to be there, like, I wish I didn't have to have it. And 57% actually support parents in restricting smartphones till high school. And I saw a stat recently that was around 80% said they themselves would not give their kid a smartphone till high school. Because really, these companies took a page of the big tobacco's playbook. They made them as addictive as possible from the outset, and they understand that they've caused harm to an entire generation. There's folks like Tim who are now, advocates against this, who have come out of these companies, but the ones who are still there, there's been a ton of exposés on this that they know what they're building. And yet smartphones have become the norm. As I said, 57% of 9 to 11-year-olds have it, and then by 12, it's 87%. And 86% of 9 to 11-year-olds have at least one social media account that they're really not supposed to even be allowed to have till 13. And everyone's got one because everyone's got one. Most parents believe it's harmful, but resisting that peer pressure is really hard because that network effect of smartphones and social media means that parents and young people feel like they just don't have a choice. And some may say the train's left the station. This is just how kids live. This is how they communicate these days. We've just got to figure out how to make it safe as possible. I can guarantee you if there was a train that left with our kids on it and we knew that there was a bridge that was out, we would stop it. We would do something. We would try to call it back. We'd try to slow it down. We'd do something. So I think that to me is the thing that you hear sometimes of a bit of a pushback on this. And I think, we know more now. We have more information. We can't ignore it anymore. And I'm curious, how many people might feel that pressure now to give their kids a smartphone or are being asked it already. But to me, what if the norm was almost nobody felt that anymore, or very few? Because when kids started to get smartphones a decade ago, there was no research on it. We were all excited. We were like, these kids are going to be so tech savvy, they're going to be so ingrained in it. But now we know, and it's overwhelming the research on this that's showing the harm it's causing. So Jonathan Haidt talks about 5 foundational harms in the book, and I'm going to touch on these kind of briefly and then dive into a couple more areas. But the area he's been most recently speaking about that he's probably the most concerned about is the attention fragmentation. These kids are getting, these dopamine hits that's just fragmenting their attention. That's meaning it's disrupting focus, their attention spans are getting shorter, and it's really hard for them to deeply engage in work in school and real world situations. Again, sleep deprivation, lots of kids take devices to bed, and it is not only does it keep them up because it's so engaging, but the blue light actually suppresses melatonin and makes it harder for them to get to sleep. And social deprivation, you think these kids are all online and they're talking to their friends, or they're playing video games with their friends, or they're on social media, talking to their friends. But in reality, that actually makes them feel more lonely because it just amplifies feelings of inadequacy, leading to increased loneliness. And I'll talk about this a bit more, but these are, again, designed to capture attention and really exploit the brain's reward system, creating dependency. And I can imagine many parents see it like irritability when they're separated from those devices. And it's that opportunity cost. Devices have replaced a lot of time kids normally would be spending playing, being independent, and when all of that is crucial for their development. And so we're really seeing these smartphones creating a mental health crisis. We've seen the rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and even suicide among teens have dramatically spiked since 2010 when kids started getting smartphones in their lives. There was a study of almost 28,000 young people, and they looked at when they first got their phone and their mental health now. And the earlier they got it, the worse their mental health was today. We're seeing things like problematic social media use. They're 2 times more likely to have anxiety and 3 times more likely to have depression. 3 in 5 girls feel persistently sad and hopeless, and 1 in 3 seriously consider suicide, which is a 60% increase in a single decade. And you can see that chart there on the right as Ontario visits to the emergency room for non-fatal self-harm. It's been a 133% increase for Ontario girls since 2010. And again, some people sometimes, try to challenge this and say well, this is just talked about more. This is just more reporting on this. There's actually these metrics have been tracked for decades. I just captured the last kind of 2 decades or so, but they used to ask young girls, do you have excellent, or how's your mental health? And we'd have 76% say they either have excellent or good mental health. And that was consistent for decades. And within 10 years, it's dropped to 42%. And young boys had something similar. It used to be 78% would say excellent or good mental health, and now it's down to 52%. Because the mental health crisis really is an emergency. And this is a warning that came from this US Surgeon General last year. And they'd only issue these kind of warnings for things like cigarettes and drugs. They are literally looking at this as it's so addictive and so harmful that we need to have warning labels on it. And unfortunately, smartphones are exposing our kids to harmful content. It's unrestricted access, gives them basically a gateway to extreme content, viewpoints that we'd never dream of exposing our kids in the real life. Hardcore pornography, extremist political views, sexualized and violent imagery. These are all things that have now just become a part of modern childhood. Like 11 years old is the average age a Canadian child is first exposed to hardcore pornography. That's an average. So just think it's 6, 7, 8 to get that kind of an average number. And 75% of 15-year-olds have been sent beheading videos. 90% of girls and 50% of boys are sent unwanted explicit content. And I agree with this statement from Dame. She like, if we're going to look back, and I don't even think it's going to take 20 years, I think it's going to be 5, 10 years and be horrified with what our kids were exposed to. And as I said, they're addicted. Like, I mean, it's a part of building a product. You want to get engagement, you want to get people to spend as much time as you can. That's what drives your revenue. That's what business is about. But that unfortunately is at the cost of our kids. And so it's little wonder why many kids routinely spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day on it. And you're seeing, 46% of teens say that they're constantly, almost constantly on their phone. And a 12-year-old is spending 29 hours a week. That's almost a full-time job. And 2 and 3 are saying they either often or sometimes find it difficult to put it down because it's just so hard. They just haven't got the skills to have that impulse control just yet. And as parents and adults, I think we can feel the same. Because really, between every screen of a phone, there's 1,000 engineers working to make this as addictive as possible. And children are particularly susceptible to this kind of design. And even though we're in Canada, which is one of the safest places in the world, it's not when they're online. Sites like TikTok, Snapchat, Roblox, they are used by sexual predators to target children. And sextortion is now the fastest growing crime against teens. And that's when somebody basically poses as, what they think is a peer. There's some kind of exchange of some kind of intimate images. And then immediately there's an extortion where they're demanding money or else they're going to send it to all their friends. And what's terrifying is the number of stories that are coming out, especially young boys that are being targeted. There's one of a mother who it was 23 minutes from the time this predator first reached out to her son to him ending his life. It took that long for him to feel so desperate. And so since 2022, there's been a 66% rise in self-generated sexual abuse imagery of children under 10. 65% of teens have been targeted by sexual offenders online, and there's 100,000 kids every day being targeted on Meta's platforms by predators. And in Canada, again, I always like to bring it back to this is happening in Canada, 7,000 reports of youth being sexually extorted in the last 2 years. That's about 10 a day. And that's just reported cases. I'm sure there's a ton of kids who are just not sharing that and suffering in silence. Because when we give our children access to the whole world in their pocket, we give the whole world access to our kids. And this is fundamentally changing childhood. They're experience blockers, they're distracting kids from engaging in the real world. That's really critical for the development. The average 12-year-old now spends 4 hours per day on their phone, displacing activities that they would be doing with their friends and, in the real world outside. 43% of teenagers' waking minutes are on a screen. And 4 hours is the average amount of time they're spending outside a week, which is down 50% in a decade. And that chart on the right again is the top one is normally teenagers, 15 to 24-year-olds, young adults. Time spent with friends used to be, 150 minutes a day, and it's dropped 65% since 2010. And I just can't imagine if that's how low it is there, how much lower it gets as they age. Because when kids started getting on their phone all day, it's not just what they're doing on their phone, it's what they're not doing, because they're missing out on those crucial development experiences that help them grow into healthy adults. And sadly, I could go on. There's so much coming out now about short-sightedness and the rise in that. It's been increasing 300% due to screen time overall. 84% of bullying happens online because kids are way more brave behind a screen. Kids are getting over 500 notifications a day, which is just unimaginable for how distracting that must be in learning and just trying to stay focused. And kids are beginning to crave these dopamine hits because it's there. Everything is gamified. Everything is in front of them, just try to keep their attention, and it's making them feel dependent on it to feel good. And even 53% of 9 to 17-year-olds report neck pain because they're constantly looking down at their device. And academic performance is plummeting around the globe since 2010. And I'll share a bit more about that later. So it's a little wonder why the people who developed this product don't give it to their kids. Steve Jobs didn't allow his kids to have an iPad because he knew it was dangerous. Ivan Spiegel, who developed Snapchat, he credits his own success to having very limited time, and he limits his own kids to 1.5 hours of screen time per week. Bill Gates didn't allow his kids to have a smartphone or their own computer until 14, and he now wishes it was 16 or older. And as parents, this isn't our fault. It's not our fault, but it is our responsibility. So how do we change this? Yes, leaders around the world are starting to look to how we could legislate to sort of protect childhood, but we really don't have time to waste. That does take years. We do need to take action on that. But there's things we can do right now as parents and work together and come together as this team approach, because this is a village that we need to make this happen. We need the schools on board. We need parents on board. We need to engage the young people and have them be educated on some of this. And so some of the actions that came again of the anxious generation that are something we can all do today is delay smartphones until high school. And I'm going to get into each one of these individually. Delay social media till 16 at least, phone-free schools, but it has to be bell to bell. And the critical one here is more independence and free play and responsibility in the real world. It's not about taking everything away. We've got to give them back some more independence in childhood. So the goal here is talking about also delaying smartphones. That's the first action that we should be considering. So it's about encouraging kids to develop the real world skills and roll it back and not introduce it until they're more developmentally ready. And I just want to be clear, this is not anti-tech. Again, I've been in the tech industry for 20 years. This is pro-childhood. It's not about delaying technology completely. It's not an all or nothing solution. It's got immense benefits that these kids should be able to take advantage of, but at age appropriate and developmentally appropriate times. Because childhood's fleeting. We have such a small window, and these kids really deserve to grow up without these addictive algorithms and without this age and inappropriate content on smartphones and social media. And if we all agree to delay smartphones and instead give them either simple phones until at least the end of grade 9 or high school, that's kind of it's a general time. It's not a perfect age. The peer pressure instantly reduces. So saying no can feel totally impossible if you feel like you're doing this alone. But if we act together, we can make this infinitely easier for everybody. And so we've seen organizations around the world pop up. I spoke about Wait Until 8's been around for years. They've got over 100,000 parents who have pledged to delay smartphones. And Smartphone Free Childhood is actually, I think they launched just about a year ago, and they have 110,000 parents, and they're making massive waves over in the UK. Canada, we are growing here in support, because we definitely were launched not until it officially into September or later September, but every conversation I have, there's just more people getting behind this. And so our goal here is to consider signing this pledge, share it with others, because again, the more people that pledge to delay, the easier this gets for everybody. And you might understand, what's the matter? What's the big deal about a pledge? Why should I do it? It's again, all about strength in numbers, because the more people we see are getting behind this, the more we'll feel empowered, the ones who are on the fence about it. And it's just common commitment. We can create this new norm where it's not the norm to just give an old iPhone as soon as they get into middle school or earlier. And so it's really simple. You can enter some information. You don't even have to share your child's full name if you want to put an alias in there. But you basically share a bit about what year they are. It will grow with them. So as they move to the next year, the system actually moves it forward. Sign the pledge. And then we actually recently put out some results where you can actually see by province, by school, by grade, how many have signed, and see how that's kind of growing within your community. Because this parent pledge really makes this collective action simple. If we commit to this, and you can see others around, and our goal is to connect you with those other parents who also want to, because that's a big part of it. If you can work together, talk about this, support each other, it's just so much easier. So how do we start to navigate this with our kids and this shift? Because it is going to be a shift. It's going to have to happen. So I'm going to share a couple things to consider. So one is being what's called tech intentional. There's this woman called Emily Churkin. She's an incredible screen time consultant. She came up with this definition, which is using screen-based technology when it enhances and nurtures and supports yourself, your child, and your family in a way that aligns with your values, but resisting and delaying or limiting screen use that interferes with healthy mental, physical, cognitive, and emotional development. So it's always less is more, later's better, and relationships and skills before screens. And also just think about the why they're using technology, like why they might be using this phone or any kind of device. Are they creating? Like, are they creating something, using their brains, actively learning something, developing new skills? Are they connecting? Are they leveraging technology to actually build relationships, ideally in person? Or are they consuming? Are they consuming content to avoid boredom, to avoid an awkward situation, emotions that's taking away from sleep or social interactions? And even how they're using it. So, like, the location's important. Are they using a device in open spaces, supervised, or are they plugged into a personal device alone in their room? Consider the medium. Watching TV, in a room reduces the nearsightedness and neck issues compared to looking at your a small device. And even the frequency and time. So occasional use for short periods of time provides exposure to tech and some of this technology without it taking away too much from other activities. And again, when people, I find, sometimes get into screen time and smartphones and everything else, like, there is a difference that I know Jonathan Haidt likes to always highlight. It's like things like story time, like this is where TV is a little different. Like movies, books, TV, they have this coherent narrative arc where you've got a beginning and middle and an end. There's a structure to it that actually brings in our emotions, it builds suspense, we connect with those characters. And it requires you to focus for a sustained amount of time to actually pay attention, and that trains the brain to really focus and process that information versus fragmenting time, which is those short form content on TikTok and Reels and Shorts, delivering that bite sized dopamine hit that really trains that brain for instant gratification. And it really just hijacks that reward system. And it's literally designed to be like a slot machine, just like what's next? It's something novel every single time. And it rewires the brain for constant novelty, making it longer, more meaningful activities feel very boring. And so it's hard for them to keep attention spans. And even consider access over ownership. So, like, giving your child access to a family device on your rules, whether it's a family computer, a shared phone, or a tablet for occasional use. And consider delaying getting their own smartphone and even social media accounts until later, because it changes the psychology as soon as they feel like they own it, as opposed to being allowed to use it. And especially on social media, if you create an account, then those algorithms start to take effect and they get really dark really quickly. And again, some may say this is the way of the future. Parents just need to teach their kids how to use it safely. And if not, they'll be left behind. And yes, digital literacy is extremely important. We do need to teach our kids, what to be aware of, talk to you when they get exposed to something. And Protect Young Eyes is an amazing organization I want to highlight because they give all kinds of resources of how to talk to kids, schools even how to introduce some things with that. And they've got some great resources on trying to build digital literacy, because that is important. That's probably the most critical thing we have to teach our kids, is how to be aware of how to try to navigate online safely. But parental controls are really hard to navigate. So if you think just like making it as like locked down as possible is gonna be the best option, it is really hard. Even the most tech savvy parents have challenges with this. There's so many loopholes that kids figure out how to get around. And sometimes it takes hundreds of setting changes to actually make it as age appropriate as possible. And so that's why you see most kids actually don't have it on their phone, because their parents just give up. It's a ton of work, and it's just sometimes too much for people to even try to manage. So just hope for the best. And most of them figure out some ways to get around it anyways. And again, some people may feel like kid will be fine, and I'm sure, and I hope that is true in many cases, but every kid is different. I think this is something that I really see in conversations with parents, is like sometimes there'll be one kid that like actually is really just naturally good at kind of controlling themselves and controlling this stuff. And then they'll have another kid in the same household brought up the same way that just naturally gets sucked into these devices differently. And so you won't really know until they have one. But I can say right now, I'm in a group with like 600,000 parents who every day are posting stuff about this. No family has regretted delaying too long, but many regret introducing too soon. So if you are considering giving your child a smartphone, or when you do get to that point, ask yourself, what's the purpose? Because I think what tends to happen, and I will say I was the same until recently, was I just assumed that the first thing was just giving them my old phone. But if they like to listen to music, maybe that's something that they like to do. There's some options that are coming out, some amazing products that are trying to give kid-friendly options that aren't on screens. So things like the Mighty 3 player, it actually syncs with your Spotify or your Amazon list, and they can listen to music. If they're going to be home alone, like coming home soon, or maybe they want to talk to their friends, I want to shout out to everybody. There's this option called Fongo, and it's in Canada. It's $5 a month for a phone. And it gives them a great way to, again, if they come home and they'll be alone for a couple hours, they have a way to navigate this. We got this in our house with our 7-year-old and her little friends all got one. And it's the cutest thing to see them actually figure out how to navigate a conversation without seeing somebody, how to leave a voicemail, how to just say hello when they pick it up. And in general, like if there ever was an emergency and something they needed to reach out, I can guarantee you they have no idea how to get into my phone. Like we have this now just for that. So they have 911 there, they know how to call, they know how to, all the numbers are there. And when we grew up again, everybody had a home phone. So that was always there, and that doesn't exist anymore. And I think actually we need to get back to that. But for me, I know some of the telcos around here, it was like $60, $70 a month for a home phone. This is $5. So something to consider. And if you do feel like you want to be able to check in with them or send some kind of messages, smartwatches are an option. There's definitely some pros and cons with it. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it is a better option if you look for a parent controlled one. Again, Garmin is a great option. You can send canned messages to approved contacts. You can turn it off at certain times of the day. That's the big thing to be careful about with watches, is they can be a massive distraction, because if they're on them all the time, you want to make sure you have one that you can turn off at night, turn off during school, things like that. But it is better than a full smartphone. And again, access to the internet occasionally, think of that family laptop that you can give access to in an open space. They're not that sexy, but flip phones are coming back. Lots of the folks who are young adults are actually going after these, and even other adults are switching to them because it's just a little more simple. It does have a little more friction of being able to text people, but that is a good thing in some ways. And if you are then thinking again, you want to give them a little bit more, the Pinwheel is available in Canada. It's there's also ones called like Bark and Gab, but they're only in the US. The Pinwheel is literally a product that's been designed with a custom operating system that you literally cannot get an open browser or social media on it. So you can give them all of the tools that can come with that device, like messaging and calling and music. But they can't get the app store unless you allow them. But then every app has to be approved. And some of them you can't even approve because Pinwheel won't let you. You can't get TikTok, you can't get social media, you can't get open browsers, you can't get any kind of AI chatbots. They've locked it down like that in hopes of just giving kids more of the tool that can be helpful as they start to get some independence. So it is that kind of phase of like starting with that basic device and then introducing it slowly at an age appropriate stages. And then if your child already has a smartphone, it's never too late to make some changes. And even if it's like the whole, I hear this a lot, like, well, I gave my older sibling, older kid one, and so I think I should get one at the same age. I'm just here to remind parents that like you have the right to change your mind when you have new information, right? It's never too late to make a change. And it's not easy saying no, but it is something that you have the right as a parent to do. And so what you can do as a first step is set an example with your own phone usage. If there's one thing I heard out of that teen 40 students focus group, was their perception was their parents have worse habits than they do. And so call a family meeting and say you want to talk about screen time and phone usage, but don't talk about theirs, talk about yours. And ask them for their input on what you can do better to be less reliant on screens. And so if you do that, you'll model what you want to see in them, and then inherently they'll, I'm sure, take that in and think about their own usage. But I think that's the thing we got to do. We got to be leaders in this ourselves, and we have to show that we're willing to recognize if we are in our phones too much and what we can do and seek their input into that. And create healthy habits as a family. So again, creating those device-free spaces and times. So get them out of the bedrooms. If there's one thing you do, take that away. And meal times, make that a space that doesn't have that phone, and it's more about connecting with each other. Limit your own use, as I said. I've made changes myself with my own kids. I keep it away from me as much as I can. I put it in the other room. And if I do have to use it, I try to narrate what I'm doing. So maybe I'm looking for a recipe for dinner tonight, or maybe I have to message someone from work that needs an immediate answer, or I'm messaging their friend to see if they can come over later so they can have a play date. But just telling them more, and so they sort of see it's not just me doom scrolling on Instagram or something. and tech together. Again, create those meaningful ways you guys can do it together, introduce it safely, start to show them like we do have to do that. But it's similar to, you wouldn't just hand a key over to a 16-year-old and say, go drive. You have to walk them through it. You have to teach them how to do it safely and do that together. And again, there's some cool products like the brick that's come out. It only works on iPhone, so unfortunately I don't have it, but you could just tap it and it'll actually lock out temporarily all these any apps that you want to remove. So I've heard people say, like students actually in university use this. They tap it in their dorm room and it locks their phone down. So they go to the library and study, and all they have is the ability to like phone and listen to music. Or like adults are doing this on date night and they're tapping it when they go out for a date and it doesn't have anything but text and calling so they can reach the babysitter if needed, but they don't even get distracted by that themselves. So you just come back and you tap it and it unlocks it again. But it's just something like that little barrier you have to create to change these habits. And if you're looking for some resources of how to have some conversations with middle schoolers or the high schooler teens, Screen Strong is a great resource. They've got a bunch of videos too that are actually put together by young people, because it just feels a lot more relevant when you're kind of hearing this from somebody who is a similar age, maybe lived through this themselves. And if you are thinking about ways to pull back, again, considering switching to a phone that's a bit more built for kids and parents in mind, set those strong boundaries, whether it's the rules kind of around it or the limits that you can and the time that they can spend on it. And if it's not too late or you feel you still can, get together with a couple of those other parents and see if you can roll it back altogether. But try to focus on the positive side. Again, like it's going to feel like everything's getting taken away, but if you can give them more independence, give them some more time together, then hopefully it feels like it's not just that. But again, this will be infinitely easier if you have a few of those parents around them on board with this. So going into social media side. So again, try to know social media before 16, because the great irony is it really does make you feel, the more you immerse into it, the more lonely and depressed you feel. And getting kids through puberty is the most vulnerable time when they should not be on social media. And the way kids use it is unlike kind of play. It's very strategic. It's very performative. And unfortunately, it's usually harmful when it comes to the cyberbullying side of it. And these apps are just getting less safe. So if you guys know, recently Meta removed fact checking and reduction of moderation. So there's only more inappropriate and harmful content on Facebook and Instagram now. I don't know if you guys saw in the news a few weeks ago, they actually made some of these tweaks and implemented them, and kids' feeds were flooded with videos of people being murdered and killed. And it was all over the news that just got flooded because they made some changes to what they were doing here with moderation. And these companies are they have transparency reports they put out every quarter. Between July and September of last year, TikTok removed 444,000 accounts linked to child grooming and sex trafficking. And 39% of the content where minors are solicited for sex actually get through moderators, and they still have moderators. And 70% of a YouTube's recommended content turns harmful as soon as you do one search on a video for disordered eating. And on Snapchat, there's a new movie coming out called, I think, Can't Look Away. It's a documentary on this, but there's a huge problem going on with Snapchat and fentanyl and making it basically a drug dealer's haven to be able to reach kids, and what's happening to the fentanyl crisis with teens. And kids are going to get exposed, whether you lock it down as much as you can or you don't have one. If some other kids have it, there's a good chance they're going to get exposed to something. So you've got to keep that open dialogue with your kids about these topics and ensure they know they can come to you if they get exposed to something, and provide, support and not judgment as best you can. But these tech companies are creating these like Titanic-sized dangers, and yet they're taking credit when you see them release things like, oh, we're going to increase like the parental controls on this, and we're going to patch a couple things over here. They're trying to convince us that they're responsible enough to make it safe for kids. But in reality, it's just literally patching some lifeboats on a Titanic. And governments are trying to step up. We're seeing this mostly around the world, who are stepping up and saying we need to make some changes, and we have to recognize social media is as addictive as alcohol, because dopamine is the chemical that makes us feel really good when we smoke or drink or gamble. It's highly addictive, and we have age restrictions on those things, but we have no age restrictions on social media or smartphones. So Unplugged Canada actually this week took a bit of a step forward on this. We're actually, we've created a call to action, because we had a lot of parents who were reaching out to us whose kids already have a phone, or they are grandparents or advocates or aunts and uncles, and they wanted to see some systematic change on this. So we actually just launched this on our website, and we're trying to get more voices, because in order for government or public health to take action, they need to see that the public wants this. So I highly encourage you to check out Unplugged Canada's site and actually, think about supporting that and sharing it, because if we don't raise up and share it, it's going to take a lot longer for us to see kind of systematic changes with government. Phone-free schools. So the recommendation is to lock it away for the entire day. And you guys are, I think, really lucky to have an amazing admin staff that have supported that. That is rare as somebody in the public system right now. We have still it in the schools at middle school and high school, but it is out of the instructional time, which is a step forward. But we really have to give kids that 6 to 7 hours of uninterrupted learning time, because the global test scores around the world have been plummeting since these came in. So math and science and reading, and yes, it was exacerbated by COVID-19, and that made everything worse. This was all trending this way well before that, with the introduction of ed tech and devices. We're seeing the distraction effects of these devices really overwhelming the educational benefits that they can bring. Because imagine if you're in grade 7, like everyone just go back to like your middle school days. And imagine in your backpack, you could throw in your Walkman, your CDs, your television, all your favorite movies, gaming system, some Pokemon cards, your camera, all of your albums of you and your friends, a computer, maybe some Playboys. That's what it's like to give a kid a smartphone. Imagine trying to in school pay attention to what's going on in the class if you have that literally in your pocket. And as I'm sure as you guys have seen here with, the policy that's here, is like when you don't have them all day, there's more socializing, interaction, and play, better focus and attention, feeling more safe and less anxiety. That's a theme we've seen in HRM, the student well-being reports. There's a lot of concern with that, and behavioral issues just keep rising, and bullying, but that all starts to go down as soon as they're out of the schools. So again, well done for having the leadership here to take that action. But again, this is not all about taking everything away. Let's give the kids something back. So we're trying to restore that play-based childhood. They need more play. They need more independence. They need more risk-taking and age-appropriate risk-taking and independence to get self-governing, because our kids really are smarter, safer, and stronger than our culture gives them credit for. This is a quote from Lenore Skenazy. She's the co-founder of Let Grow. It's like an amazing organization. She's a mom. If you ever heard this story, like probably 15 years ago or 10 years ago, where she let her son go on the subway at like 10, and it went like national news that she was like basically a reckless parent. But she had done that route with him many times before, and they lived in the city, and he knew it, and they knew he was safe doing it, but it got blown out of proportion. So she's been a big advocate for just trying to give kids back some independence, because they build confidence. They build resilience, they build independence, they build critical thinking. Like these kids need these challenges and setbacks to be able to actually manage that as an adult and be able to have the confidence that they can solve problems, they can build self-trust. They need to have that self-resilience and problem-solving skills, because these are the skills that kids are losing these days. There we go. So again, Let Grow is a great organization. This is a little experiment. They recommend doing it in the schools as a school class. So again, everyone's doing it together, but parents can do this. It's go home and do something new on your own. Climb a tree, run an errand, make a meal. Doesn't have to be something like crazy risky, but just something that they do on their own that they've never done before. We did this with my 5 and 7-year-old recently, and I said, what do you want to do that you've never done all by yourself, but you think you can do it? And they were like, I want to make my own lunch. So they got up the next morning, they literally went to the fridge, picked out all their fruits, vegetables, sandwich stuff. They cut it all up themselves. We stepped back and just let them step up and do it. And they were so proud of themselves. Such a simple thing. And, you can think of a million different things that you could do. I'm trying to encourage people to do this as like a summer project, summer thing of like encouraging kids to go to the store. Like we let our kid now, whenever she wants ice cream or something, we're like, here's the money, go in and ask for it, tell them what you want, get the change, figure out if you have enough. And at first it was really intimidating for her, but now she's just like, yep, let's go. And so the whole point is like replacing that screen time with real world. So it doesn't feel like it's a deprivation. It's that they're getting even more back. So I'm going to sum this up as basically, again, later is better and less is more. Every family, though, is different. So how you approach this within your family is your decision. And but just know if you have trouble with your kids' iPad or TV or video game right now, it's going to be infinitely harder with a smartphone, but that there are alternatives to consider. So it doesn't have to be just like defaulting to your old iPhone, and that there's a growing community of support to change these norms. So you're not alone. So again, to summarize, if your kid doesn't have one yet, consider delaying till at least 14. Consider no social media till 16. Tech together as a family and teach digital safety. Get a simple phone when they need it, to keep in touch, and create opportunities for more free play and in-person independence, and join the 2,000 other parents who have signed our pledge to delay. But if your kid has one, again, make some simple changes, like no phones upstairs rule. Get them out of the bedrooms because that's where the majority of the harm goes unnoticed. Use strong parental controls to make the device as safe as possible. Regularly check their phone and their usage. Just know, like, this is your phone that they're using, and you have the right to do that for their safety. Teach digital safety and create more, again, opportunities for time with their friends that's away from screens. I've heard some people saying they're kind of putting these little phone booths in the kitchen and just say, when their friends come over, just throw your phone there. You can come get it whenever you want, but it stays in the kitchen. And create a safe space for conversations so that, they can come to you when they have concerns or are exposed to something. And engage with other parents. I think this is probably one of the harder things too, but think about starting a book club. Send this book to your friends and say, we should read this together and discuss it. Recommend they watch things like Adolescence. If you haven't seen that Netflix series yet, I highly recommend it. It's gut-wrenching, but it is reality. Childhood 2.0. You can talk to, I don't know what what it is, the version of it is here, but the SACs, PTAs, raising awareness in the schools, and then, telling them about Unplugged, telling others, who even aren't even at grammar, like, who else do you know that could benefit from this to see this movement? And just keep talking. I think that's the whole thing. We got to keep talking about this. We have the power to change this. And so we have to have conversations with each other around it. So thank you for listening, for engaging. Navigating this fast-paced world of social media and smartphones is not easy. But it's much easier if we do this together and we support each other, and just know that, this is a new frontier of parenting, and we have the power to change this. This is only 10 years old, this phone-based childhood. Does not need to stay the way it is. We can make changes. So thank you.
On Zoom can hear me.
Yeah.
I know you want to do a question and answer period, and if I missed this in case when I left, did you mention the session you're doing on April 24th?
Oh, yes, I did not. Let me put that back up.
I will also send this out to the community when we send out the recording.
Yes.
But I want to make sure you highlight that, because that is also in person and there's a Zoom option as well.
Thank you. I actually missed my last slide. Okay. So we do have, again, last thing I'll say is consider signing the pledge. If your child doesn't have a smartphone and you're interested in delaying, consider signing that call to action we have of just generally trying to raise the age of social media and get some better controls. And honestly, the biggest thing I feel like is just better awareness, at the public health level to this stuff. I can do only so many talks in schools. We need this to be happening across the country and across Nova Scotia broadly, and coming from our health system. But there is another event coming up. So this is one that I'm running. It's another version of this, diving into the details of how smartphones and social media affect boys versus girls. So I've kind of talked high level at the impacts here, but this really gets into some of the nuances, because, as I mentioned, the show Adolescence really gets into how social media affects boys, because I feel like a lot of conversations I hear, everyone thinks of what girls and how it affects body image and eating disorders and what have you. But this really cracks open the conversation around that. And so if you watch that and you're wondering what can I do? What do I need to know? That session's kind of meant to give you some more kind of resources and tools around that. So you can register at the link there, and you can check it out on our website as well. Yes. Yeah, we did one with the RCMP in February, and that was really insightful because it was talking about especially sending intimate images. And really, I learned a lot as far as, how dangerous it can be, even just you share something and getting that into kids' minds, that if you share something that can, and it's considered trafficking child pornography, and you can have a record, and how tough that means getting into schools, getting into jobs in the future. So these small actions that I think kids take for granted today can have very long lasting impacts. So we do try to have, we've had an event in January at my school. That one, we have this one coming up in April. We're going to do, I believe, one in maybe May, kind of specifically looking at how it impacts neurodiverse kids and kind of looking at that. We've got another mom who is going to be championing that one. And we'll probably be doing some stuff around the summer again, trying to encourage people to get outside and maybe try some of those let grow experiments. So yes, there is a recording of it on our YouTube channel. It sometimes feels very weird to promote our social channels, but that is still a place where you can get some information as adults, because it's a repository more for just documenting it. Again, sessions like this, that not everyone can make it tonight. You know, our goal, typically, or what I'll do with these ones is usually put it up there so we can share it to folks who couldn't make it, and make sure our goal is to make it as accessible as possible and just reach as many people as we can. No, I'm not going to promote that. Well, yes, I mean, it'd be great more for the fact that people, if more people can get, you know, information that's digestible and easy to kind of consume, great. It is, yeah, it's tough to reach people. That's our biggest challenge, because not everyone's on social, not everyone sees the stuff. You got to build an email list to try to reach people. So it's kind of word of mouth is what we're trying to get as much as possible. So yeah, thank you for that. I didn't remember that one, so. Was there any questions online? Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
So my son is doing that in grade 1. We did
nice.
a session a couple months ago.
Oh, nice.
And now upping it, doing like to add on to whatever your project was at the beginning.
Yes.
And it was great because it was send in just a photo. So the teacher printed them out. So all the kids they all kind of shared what they, you know, what their little independent project was. And then now
Nice.
there's some email yesterday, they're gonna build on it.
Nice.
So extending that or trying something new. Yeah, so it's been very fun. But,
Amazing.
and they all really enjoyed it.
That's good.
Were they doing it as well? I think it's starting to, no, this is from the teachers. Yeah, this came from the teachers this past year. So they probably started it this year, because it was just last month, which is great. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions online, so I can probably drop the Zoom. And then obviously we can still stick around here and chat. But yeah, thank you everybody online for joining.